Hello everybody. In this video we're going to go over topic 2, lesson 6, example 2, and we are going to look at solving an equation using different methods and which method you prefer and why. So when we're talking about solving the equation, we're talking about finding the x values. So the first method I'm going to use here is I'm going to just factor. So factoring. And then the second one, I'm going to use what's called the quadratic equation. So in our class, you have not been introduced quite yet to the quadratic equation, but it should have been something introduced to you in Algebra 1. So we're just going to go over it really quickly. The quadratic equation is derived from completing the squares, and I will show you that in a different video. But right now, let's look at the factoring. So I have 6x squared minus 7x minus 20 equals 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply 6 by negative 12. Sorry, I was seeing if there was a greatest common factor. I thought maybe for a second there was, but there is not. So let's do 6 times negative 20, which is going to be negative 120. And then I'm going to find two factors that multiply to give me 120, but divide to give me, let me start that over again. Let me find a value that multiplies to give me negative 120 and adds to give me negative 7. Sorry, I was starting to do the math on my calculator. Pulling out that handy dandy calculator. So we're looking for 7. I see 8 and 15 are options. And 8 plus 15 does give me, or 8, one of these has to be negative, so 8 minus 15 will give me the negative 7. Now remember, I do now have to divide by 6. Simplify, so we're looking at 4/3 and negative 15/6. I don't know, 3 could go into both of those, so negative 5/2. All right, and putting those into factored form, we have 3x plus 4, because again, you take your denominator, put it in front of the x. 2x minus 5, denominator goes in front of the x. The numerator goes as your constant in your factor. Then these will be equal to 0. 0 product property. And we're going to get x is equal to negative 4/3, 5/2. Notice here that it's just the opposite sign of what we found up here. 4/3, we have a negative 4/3. Negative 5/2, we got a positive 5/2. So that was an easy way to find our values. The next way that I'm going to do, the next method is I'm going to continue following the book, and I am going to do the quadratic formula. Now I know you've heard of many songs for the quadratic formula. Luckily, you don't have to sing it. So we're going to do x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now here is a common mistake. People forget to put the full thing over 2a. So you have to put the negative b. The negative b is included in this whole expression. So you need to make sure that that negative b is also being divided by that 2a. All right, let's talk about my coefficients. A in this case is 6. B in this case is negative 7. And C in this case is negative 20. All right, so let's start by saying x equals plus or minus the square root. We're doing the negative b. 4 is a constant, 2 is my constant, and let's start substituting my numbers in. 2 times 6. We also have a 6 up here for the A. B's are -7, so we have a -7 here. We also have a -7 here that's squared. And then C is -20. All right, so negative times a negative gives us a +7, plus or minus the square root. -7 squared will be 49, minus 4 times 6 times -20, so 4 times. And we get -480, all divided by 12. A negative times a negative gives us that positive. So we have 49 plus 480. Which is going to be 529. And now the square root of 529 is 23. I know I had to put that on my calculator. I did not know it off the top of my head. Minus 23 divided by 12. So now we have two different solutions here. We have 7 plus 23 divided by 12, and we now have 7 minus 23 divided by 12. When you put this in your calculator, do 7 plus 23, hit enter, and then divide that by 12. And I get 5/2. And then 7 minus 23, hit enter, divide that by 12, and I get -4/3. I actually got decimals. I use the math and then frac. Math key. And then I chose an arrow to get my fractions so that we could match the answers to what we did before. So looking at what we did before, we do have -4/3 and 5/2 here. And we got the solutions here, -4/3 and 5/2. And remember, this is where, when we talk about this being the solution, first of all, we do have to have this equal to 0. Even with the quadratic formula, you do have to have this equal to 0. Another thing this tells us is, again, where our zeros are. So this, again, is going to tell us where we cross the x-axis. Okay, one more way to solve this, since we've been talking about graphing a lot. Another way I would solve this is I would put this into a graphing calculator. So let's go to Desmos. And I'm going to grab the, I guess I can't highlight that, 6x squared. Minus 7x. Minus 20. And we're looking for all the points where my output would be equal to 0, or when y would be equal to 0. And looking at that, we have a -4/3 here. -1.3333 comes out to 4/3. And 2.5 is 5/2. So just graphically, we can actually see our solutions right away. If you do have access to a graphing calculator, this is a great way to check your work. All right, guys, so if you have any questions, please get a hold of me as soon as possible. We'll look at the solutions here. They use the quadratic formula for this one. They do factor by grouping. Again, another great way to factor. So if this is your personal favorite, go right with it. It's a great way to factor. It gets into those trinomial, cubic factorings. And then the conclusion. Both solution methods give the same results. Factoring more may be more efficient, but the quadratic formula always works regardless of whether the function has real or imaginary roots. So that's a great key there. The quadratic formula will always work for real and imaginary roots. All right, when you substitute negative numbers into a formula, such as a quadratic formula, use parentheses to help keep track of the effect of the sign. I did that back here as well, so you notice here. So make sure you always keep those parentheses. All right, if you have any questions, please let me know as soon as possible, and we will see you in the next video.